Okay, I am here with my distinguished visitor, the one and only Mr. Katende, who is a man of all free thoughts. I would like him to engage us here. The reason why I want this debate to be open because he's a young man, but at the same time, a free thinker who thinks outside the box and throws the box away. Mr. Katende, I want you to challenge the youth of today in terms of, and by youth, I'm told youth go up to what, 35 years?
Yes.
Yes, 35. In terms of what do you think would be the most probable thing for them to equip themselves for the mass-changing future? By the way, Mr. Katende, you were telling us about ChatGPT 3 or 4, right?
4 is coming out,
Yeah, I saw 4 being advertised already.
Yeah.
And they're saying 4 is going to do incredible works.
Yes.
Even before 3 gets grounded. Yesterday I was with a gentleman who had no knowledge of what ChatGPT was. And these are guys who are doing IT. You know, so what is the future, Mr. Katende? Before even I can explain that, I saw an advert one time where a lady was seated with the parents and then her hand started vibrating. I don't know if you ever saw that advert. And you could see in her hand there were like reflections of a mirror of a phone. And she said, "Hello, I am here with my parents, can you call me back?" And they were talking about 5G, 5G technology. And man, I was like, wait a minute, these things are already on us? So even when this COVID started coming, there were those, what you call them, conspiracy theorists who were saying that, I was one of those who wrote extensively on that. And they were saying that 5G they're doing these 5G emissions and these 5G have a tendency of sucking oxygen out of the environment, and people collapse over the streets. So tell us something about that, sir.
Yeah, so you've quite mentioned a lot of things in your introduction. You have called me out to talk to the youth. You've meandered around ChatGPT 3, 4, and then 5G technology. So I think the intersection between the youth, a young population, and technology is becoming quite interesting, but it is definitely unavoidable. It has already been happening. The internet age has come with a lot of information, a lot of data, much of it being irrelevant, making it a very important task for the youth to sieve out what is relevant from the many irrelevant. However, it would also be quite naive of us to celebrate the advancement of technology or the technological revolution without highlighting the shadows that hide behind, without highlighting the hazards that hide behind those shadows of technological revolution. Speaking from my youth perspective, I myself being a youth, I think there are quite a lot of important things that we could need to highlight about our generation and how much technology has treated us before we can even talk about some of the potential that it has to transform our lives. I'll start by saying that I am not the person that possesses all the ideas in the world, but I could single-handedly look at the youth and tell them, you know what, this is the magic bullet. But I think that I can give them my perspective based on what I have learned. It is argued that wisdom basically has 2 schools. It has the school of knowledge, listen and learn. Then it has the school of experience, live and learn. So I am trying to employ the different schools of thought that I have garnered to see that I can add a meaningful contribution to the life of probably a few youths out there that might benefit from this, but also that will have a task of applying it in their local context. So we discussed at the time freely that the first phone was probably, it came out in March 1876, and you could think that the communication revolution was going to render isolation less power. This was further boosted by the advent of social media that has been flying around, and you could have the feeling that now that people can text freely, so fast, so cheaply, as a generation, we are going to be more connected. We are going to we are going to advance, we're going to learn from each other. But unfortunately, that is not what is literally happening. You are seeing more collapse in our generation, more depression, more isolation, more loneliness in a society where communication is so easy. So you would then assume that digital tools then provide simply an illusion of companionship without the demands of actual friendship. So people expect less from each other, and then they demand more from the technology. People would rather text than meet up. They would rather text than talk. They would rather hide behind their phones than face each other deeply, and that has had a very massive effect on our friendships in a generation and age like ours, where interactions have got to be intentional, because the fact that there is a lot of information, it has created a culture where people have adopted literally a concept called relativism in each and everything. They question everything apart from themselves. So that means that to be advised, to be held accountable, is somehow intentional. It has got to be sought out, and yet technology is seemingly dividing us more apart. Analysts usually look at friendships across several ways. I mean, like when I was young, or when we were young, we used to make friends by proximity. A 2-year-old meets a 2-year-old, they automatically become friends. At that point, what matters is not status, but likeness. The fact that we look like each other, it meant oneness. So that is why, like a kid from a wealthy family would naturally mix with a kid from a very impoverished background, because they look alike. Now, as we started to grow up, we started to make friends by interests. I'm interested in football, someone is interested in football. We come together, we share a lot of moments. Those moments create memories. We become friends, we become more connected to each other. Now, as we grow up, our interests change. Automatically, we lose some friends because we are no longer interested in certain things. And then we pick new interests, and those interests expose us to new people. However, by that time, we have less time. We lead very busy lives, so we have less time to cultivate, to invest in meaningful relationships. We simply want a certain kind of company that cannot be sustainable sometimes because of our busy schedules. Now, that eventually means that the generation has got to become more intentional, looking out for meaningful interactions with the world, with each other, because the higher you go, it's the more complex you become as a person. It's the higher you develop a complex personality. For example, like you, there are principles you've held for 10, 20 years, and they have proved effective. So that means that getting you out of those principles is not going to be easy. Now, imagine the complexity you share, the complexity I share. So all of us are going to be more complex over time. So that naturally means that with more principles, you're going to have less people in your life. Now, if you want to be a kind of person that is going to retain meaningful relationships in your life, you're going to have to break through the boundaries of technology. You're going to be more intentional in searching out and seeking people, seeking rebuke, seeking advice. You're going to be more available to people and live a life, because of course we also understand that there are many people that pause the idea of living life to the future. And I think yesterday I was actually watching a funny bit, a comic discussion between whether to buy land or to buy a car. And so the guy who was saying like I should buy a car first was saying that you want me to sacrifice 9 out of 10, and then I reach 0.9, and then I start to enjoy my life. And the guy who was buying who was for buying land was more into a perspective of planning. However, these are not mutually exclusive. These are ideas that can actually coexist. Life does not urge you against planning, but we've also understood that people are important resources. If they can fit in your life, they can save you years of searching. If you have your wives, you're mature. So that means that if you spoke to me, you would definitely impart to me your wisdom or your experience of lots of years, and you would save me some of the troubles that I would have otherwise faced as a youth. So if you've become a little bit more open-minded, if I looked at technology with the power it has to connect them more and not to limit them, if I broke through the psychological barriers that are set by the geniuses behind these tech tools, then they would definitely create a meaningful environment. You would have some sort of social proof where people can strongly coexist with each other, where people can feel included. Even though I go offline, let's say like for a month, people would still look out for me, people would still search out for me, but that is not what is happening. The fact, the moment someone goes offline, then their personality on the internet starts to fade, and the more you get closer deeply out of internet edge, it's the more people start to forget you, not remember you, because as a generation we have been visually conditioned. We've grown up watching movies, and so our minds work with what we see in a moment. We're in the mind economy. That is why even people buy what they remember. So the moment you get off minds of people, you in other words, what I'm trying to say is like you've been programmed to remember Isaac based on your interactions online, and the moment he gets out of your life from the online environment, then that certainly means that you're not going to easily remember him. So that means that we have zeroed down to people, literally to objects. We have lent livelihood and rented it out on the internet, and once the digital age phases out like this, you would sit down and check and see that you actually do not have meaningful friends and relationships. And so people are going to tell you that, you know what, the solution to this is love yourself, because ideally you feel unloved. Just imagine you went offline for 2 months and no one is checking on you. You naturally feel unloved. So they're going to tell you to love yourself more, but that will not break it, because at the end of the day, like, we naturally love ourselves as human beings. So telling you to love yourself more, it isn't magically going to change the convictions, and yet in that period of isolation you're already developing a lot of unquestioned hypotheses. You're like, okay, why isn't Isaac checking on me? So that definitely means he's a fake friend. Why isn't this person checking on me? He's a fake friend. So you literally build a world in your mind that is unquestioned. I always usually meet such people like that, and I ask them that which person went offline and you checked out for them. So we demand for what we cannot give. So the digitization has led to a divide in that regard. We want people to pay a price that we are unwilling to pay because it is highly personal. But if it is highly personal, then that highlights the importance of other persons or people in our lives. So that is something that we should not neglect.
I remember a gentleman actually who celebrated because he had been he was able to stay off the net for 1 day. And he said, wow, he jubilated just 1 day. Now, last time, Mr. Katende, when we were having a break some time ago, you spoke about different theories or concepts where you gave examples of particular individuals, where a professor who gave examples of one guy who was about to face death, and then what options would he take? Remember those 3 scenarios you gave about some professor? Some professor who you were listening to, or was explaining something to you, and then he gave a scenario of a guy who was about to hit by a truck.
Okay,
yes.
So yeah.
Can you take us through those? Because they were quite interesting. There were about 3 different scenarios.
Exactly. So this was simply an analysis by Professor Michael Sandel. He was a Harvard professor. I think he still probably does some work for Harvard. And he was teaching a lecture called The Moral Side of Murder. And he was talking about the different perspectives with which murder could be looked at. So he gave an example He said, assume you're in a trolley car, you're driving at a very high speed, and then you realize that the brakes have failed, even though the steering wheel still works. So ahead of you are people. If you turned on your left, you would hit one person. If you turned on the right, you would hit 5 people. Where do you turn? So the class naturally responded, I would turn to the left, I hit one person and save 5 people. Not all of the class though. Some people still said that they would turn to the right and kill 5 people instead of 1. And the student who raised that argument argued that literally all challenges or dangers in the human society are faced on sacrificing the minority. So why shouldn't I sacrifice the majority this time? Anyway, that's just one of the students' opinion, but majority of the students say like they would turn to the left, kill 1 person,
and save
5. So it is better in that regard. That was the argument of the students. Now he gave another scenario. He said that assume now you're not in the car, you're not in the trolley car. You're standing on the bridge. You see the car moving at a very high speed. The brakes have failed, you realize that. And in front of the car, it is actually going to hit 5 people or even more. It is no doubt they're going to die. But then you realize that next to you is a very fat dude that is fat enough. If you just gave him a little shove, if you pushed him to the bridge, he will fall in the road. The car will hit him, he will die, but you save the people in front. You do it.
Wow.
So the story changed. The kids felt like they couldn't do it. They just felt like something is wrong. It's not possible. You understand? So he gave another scenario. You are a doctor in a hospital. You have 5 patients. If you paid attention to 4 patients, 1 would die. If you pay attention to 1 who is badly injured, the 4 would die. So of course, the medical industry has this concept of triaging. So many of the students said they would pay attention to the 4 and allow 1 to die. Then he said, now assume you have 5 patients. Each of them is missing 1 organ, 1 important organ. 1 is missing the heart, 1 is missing what? 1 is missing the liver, 1 is missing the lungs, all those important organs. And as you're there stranded, you remember that in the next room, there is a healthy patient who had come to take a nap. Extracting those 5 organs from him
would save
5. You extract the organs. It became a very difficult situation.
Sure.
So the professor clarified that in the first scenarios, we are looking at consequential moral reasoning. The consequences are important. They outweigh the facts. But in the second scenario, you're looking at categorical moral reasoning. But the very nature of the act itself is important. So naturally, if it was I would always really find it difficult to carry out the second scenario. Let it be push the guy over the bridge, or remove these 5 organs from this healthy patient. There is something that looks bad in that kind of regard.
Right.
So then he coined a statement that that is what philosophy partly does. He cautioned his students that you could study philosophy with the aim that you're going to become a better student. And he said, but you could become a worse citizen, or a better one after being worse. And then he stated that philosophy estranges us from the familiar, not by supplying new knowledge, not exactly by supplying more knowledge, but by provoking a new way of seeing. And once the familiar becomes strange, it can never be quite the same again.
True.
Self-knowledge is like a lost innocence. However uncomfortable you find it, it can never be unlearned, or it can never be unthought. And in fact, that analysis that Professor Michael did has come to be applied in quite lots of life situations. I read an article in 2020, and this was an article that was questioning the Russo-Ukrainian conflict and whether the United States of America should engage in that particular war. And this particular person pulled out a few things that are similar to the explanation of Sunday.
Right.
Because this person was saying that the United States of America are very highly a very high military power is going to engage in this war. How are the Russians going to perceive this? What is going to happen? Things like that. And he coined statements like value rationality versus instrumental rationality, the logic of consequences versus the logic of appropriateness, the right thing to do versus the best thing to do. So it could be that it is the right thing to do, but is it the best thing to do now? It would be that it is the best thing to do, but is it the right thing to do? You understand?
Good question.
So Isaac has a daughter, and she needs tuition at university. He notices that at office there is some money in the safe, and yet the daughter doesn't have tuition. So the best thing to do in that moment is between a rock and a hard place.
I know.
Is to get some of his money and help the daughter to go to school. But is it the right thing to do? So the same applies. It could be the best thing to do, but it's not the right thing to do. It could be appropriate, but the consequences could be much more severe.
Right.
So that is the kind of like how sometimes we need to think out loud, because the concepts that we look at might not necessarily be what we think. I'll give an example. Back then there was the government of Czech Republic attempted to introduce a tax on cigarettes. They had assumed that with the introduction of tax on cigarettes, one, we are going to save more people from dying. They had seen that guys were really developing health issues, so people are dying. But also, when we introduced this tax, we are going to generate some more revenue for us. So the government brought out a proposal, and of course, as you can imagine, some people were happy, some people were not happy. The companies behind the cigarettes were quite unimpressed. As amidst all that mess, Philip Morris Consultancy did a cost-benefit analysis about that the introduction of that tax.
Yes.
So I think the government had estimated to collect roughly nearly $50 million out of that tax. Now, the Philip Morris Consultancy figured out its analysis was like this. When more people smoke cigarettes, it's the more people that are going to fall sick. So hospitals are going to make more money. And the more they fall sick, some of them will definitely die.
True.
Now, when they die, the government will be saved around $2,000 in pension money that they would have given to these people had they reached retirement age.
Right.
So naturally, Philip Morris discovered that with the introduction of tax, a lot of money is going to be lost. But if a tax is not actually introduced, the government would still be saving over $100 million. So Philip Morris was, of course, castigated for that analysis that placed value on a human life, or that looked morally perverted. But he had a point in that regard. And if you look at it like that, you start to understand. When I looked at that discussion, my mind got a little bit opened because I had never looked at cost-benefit analysis alongside the moral lines.
Right.
I never looked at cost-benefit analysis that it could actually be wider than it seemed. Me, I was simply saying, okay, let's say like the benefits, the costs, and then what outweighs what.
Right.
So it's more like that in our daily life, and I think that I told you at the time that learning is very expensive, and people have not yet figured that out. To learn to draw meaningful lessons out of the experiences that we've had requires a reflective soul.
Right.
Now, one of the dangers of the digital age is the fact that people have lessened concentration. So we always discuss this, like you upload a status, it's less than 4 hours a day, and just subconsciously through the day you are checking how many people have viewed, is there a comment. So naturally this is having your concentration lessened, but it is also programming how you think about life.
Right.
So because you are less concentrated, it's going to be hard for you to reflect on life. It's going to be hard for you to plan life. People are terrified simply at the idea of thinking. It terrifies them. They go out to their rooms to think, then they put on music. 10 minutes after that, they run away from their fears, and it's more like the ego defensive mechanisms that are talked about in the psychology of psychoanalytic theory. People do not process how much their egos have grown. So if anything happens to them, they would either resort to projection, blame someone else. They would either resort to rationalization. They're hurting, they're bleeding, but then they will rationalize the situation instead of actually facing the situation. They would either do sublimation. There are quite a number of ego defensive mechanisms, and all of us in one or another are kind of victims to one or two, or a collection of them.
Right.
Yeah. So, but my talk is more intentional in inspiring a person to take meaningful steps, meaningful decisions. Life happens across literally 4 Ds. You have desires, and then you make decisions, and then you build disciplines, and then you create a determination of implementing those disciplines towards to achieve the goals of the targets that you would actually have set. So it's something. Life is too intentional. Life is too people. We don't simply march through life. Even those that claim that they're living a simple life and simplicity is the way to go, they take an effort to get out of bed every morning.
Right.
So there is nobody in this world that is actually not trying something. But when you build the necessary disciplines, the necessary, you make the right choices, because there are no choices without chances, and all of us have an opportunity to decide. All of us have an opportunity to choose. So the question is, what kind of choices are you going to make?
Right.
We live in our life generally is a reflection of choices, the choices that we have made, and to some extent we can blame the technology that it has programmed us, but it also says a lot about the people than it does about the phrase of digital transformation.
Right.
As people, we tend to be a little bit less focused, less less determined to achieve our goals. So any win that comes just takes us wherever it wants. And I remember, I think, watching a performance of George the Poet. He's a Ugandan by descent probably, but he's living in the United Kingdom, and he coined a very nice poem called YOLO, you only live once. You only live once, and he says that, and he mentioned literally, he covered lots of experiences in that poem about how the youth at that time were using that phrase, you only live once. So that meant that anything goes. You just go to the bar, you take any bottles you wanted, and then you end up in jail. Then you realize you did this. So there are actually consequences there are actually consequences to your decisions. And in fact, in that poem, he says that he mentions a line, and he said that this is something that many people don't want to say, but breathing is a luxury, and I could die today, but I would like some change, like a shopkeeper, because I can't ignore the fact that life is a lot deeper. And with that line, you really see the sense that this particular guy was trying to pump in the youth of his generation. And another poet called Ezekiel Anzono, one time he was also discussing a poem called Almost Saved. And then he in there he put he mentioned very nice lines about living, let's say, like a double standard kind of life, a very unfocused kind of life. And he said, like, let me break this down, because you need to be aware that there are certain standards that need to be there. Because if those standards are not there, then you're going to live literally a hopeless life.
Right.
So I've talked to there's a friend of mine, I was having a very interesting conversation with him, I think in December or what. He spent quite a lot of time in marriage. And I was very curious, because I've done a lot of interviews with people in that line, and I asked him what he would probably do differently if he were to search for, if he was at 30 or at 31 or late 20s and he's looking for a new wife, for a wife, sorry. And he told me, like, he would look for elements in a person that make the relationship possible, that can make marriage a success. And so the question then becomes, like, how many people possess those particular elements he was talking about, like patience and what, and love, and all those are the values that he treasured, because it so happens that the highest principle value of a society is truth. Yet the highest principle virtue we all uphold is love. Yet, still again, how we perceive love depends on the kind of truth that we know. So if you're a kind of person that has been taken away into the world of recklessness, the love of trade, and where love is based on interests that are defined. I love money. You give me what?
Money.
You give me money, I give you sex. So that is if that's the love of trade. And now if your love is established on interests that are defined and not on true values, then it questions what kind of relationship you're going to have in the long term. And issues of relationships are not particular to let's say, like, which movements are around or which laws are around. I think relationships are literally failing a lot in many parts of the world. I think I read last year that in Tunisia, I think 81% of marriages fail just after 1 year. And in Uganda, it's just that people now go quiet, especially after the COVID-19 marriage wave. Right. People simply part without letting us know, even before the dates for the wedding have been cleared. I know. But anyway, I'm not trying to veer into marriage, but I simply wanted to make a point.
Excellent point you make there. I like two things that you've said so far. You mentioned and said it is important for us to make a distinction between a right decision and a best decision in perhaps the heat of the moment. But also you made another powerful point when you said that life is only a product of our choices. And that's very important. I would like you to expound on something that I came across this morning, which says, the thought of man is not triable, for the devil himself knoweth not the thought of man. I said again, and it's a concept that has to do with still the argument of consequentialism vis-a-vis idealism and realism. And then this argument is, and for our audience there, the part of the two generis team guys there, you may want to jump in, but this is for us, for food for thought. And my young philosopher here, Katende, the incredible, I want you to demystify this concept for me. The thought of man is not triable, for the devil himself knoweth not the thought of man.
So I think that argument, that quote, the thought of man itself is not triable. The devil himself doesn't know the thoughts of man. That's accurate even biblically, that the devil doesn't know thoughts. He is not omniscient. He doesn't know everything. So then, if you start to argue, I think what the writer is trying to state is that you have thoughts in you, that you have wells that are flowing in your life. You have symptoms that are flowing from your belief system, and they are so strong enough that because they represent the best of you, they're so strong enough that if you probably paid attention to them, not even the world around you would be able to quench them. It's important to note, according to what I believe, that our thoughts are a result of our experiences and our belief system. And once what we believe is able to determine what we think and how we process life, that definitely gets reflected in the decisions that we make, because the thoughts that you're having is simply a contemplation of either the moments that you've had, the memories that you've had, or the decisions that you want to make. And once you set those decisions into motion, then you build a pattern, you build a habit. Those habits become a custom, and those customs become a culture. So if people had thoughts that are strong enough, that are quality enough to thrive, not just in their life, but also influence the lives of others, then they should, because those thoughts can actually be able to change people. It all starts from your mind, something like that.
Excellent.
However, I find also a bit of reservations in that regard, because what the thoughts that you're having, however strong, they are burning from somewhere. So to sharpen them is to increase your belief system, to increase your knowledge. It is to increase the spectrum that can test them. Because Hitler, Adolf, had a thought of establishing a Reich that is going to last for 1,000 years. Mussolini had a thought of starting and restoring the calendar of his own ascension to power. Stalin, he's actually described by Malcolm Muggeridge in his speech. He said that I have made a murderous Georgian bringer in the Kremlin, acclaimed by the intellectual elite of the world as wiser than Solomon, more human than Marcus Aurelius, and more enlightened than Ashoka. Ashoka was in India. Yes. But anyway, let me not get diverted into that. So their thoughts, as I talk now, there is a narcissist that is planning a bomb to bomb somewhere. So the question would then become, what is the intention of your thinking process, and what is the quality of these thoughts? Good or dangerous, they have the ability to affect the world, just like Hitler affected the world, just like Mussolini affected the world, just like definitely Joseph Stalin affected his Russia, USSR.
Excellent. Here is another one. Quoting from Hitler, perhaps.
Interesting.
His book, Mein Kampf, where he says that Hitler found that soft-mindedness was so prevalent amongst his people that he said, I use emotions for the many and reserve reason for the few. And I want to connote that with something again I came across this morning, which said that he who does not believe in God and the devil believes in the purity of human thinking. I want you to expound on that. And as you think about that, I want you to, my friends, part of the Sujan is to find out a book called The Power of Thinking Without Thinking. Yes.
So the first quote from Hitler is basically talking about affecting emotion, the use of emotion, and versus reason, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I wish that had stopped with Hitler, but it's a common knowledge. It's common knowledge in sales and marketing that people buy with emotion and they justify with logic. People have learned to the art of influencing us based on how we feel. We are visually conditioned, so we listen with our eyes and then we think with how we feel. So because we respond to our emotion, we give our emotional lives a lot of power. I feel like this in a moment, then that means that anybody that is able to affect your emotions is able to affect your behavior. So if you're mindless in that regard, if you do not apply the art of thinking and logic, you are going to be a bubble. You're going to be a pawn on another person's chessboard. They are going to take you in whatever direction they are going to take you. They are going to pop up an ad that you can get a MacBook Pro at $10. You're going to become excited because there is an impulse of cheaper. It's cheaper. I can't get it. So, or they're going to make you buy a Rolls Royce. That this is a car. It's better. People who sell Rolls Royce do not sell something that moves from point A to point B. No. They sell luxury, they sell status. They appeal to a certain emotion of a human heart that wants to look different, that wants to look better. And that emotion is expressed in your buying decision. So I think that would be it kind of for Hitler, but of course there are quite a lot of, it's like a 1 to 5% that will take more of an emotion to convince. So that would be kind of my take, but Hitler's philosophy definitely is widespread in nature.
Right.
It is being exhausted by genius marketers and every other person to build, because like when you're building a tribe, like Apple has built a tribe, you have what they call the interest graph, and then you have what they call the social graph. So at one point you have people in your social circle that you are trying to interest to get to present this product to. But on the other side, you have a group of like-minded people outside your social circle that you want to capture. So once you're able to provide relevancy to those audiences, then you have actually captured them for life. So you achieve something literally called a brand loyalty.
Right.
This loyalty does not exist naturally in nature. It is built, and it is going to keep being built by more manipulation. So that is why you see like Facebook like button was introduced in 2009, and it has the element of instant gratification. The more I post, the more likes I get. It's the more I feel better. It's the more I go out to create more posts. It's the more I go to check out other posts. So just like that, geniuses that are seated somewhere in the United States of America are having an entire generation of people, billions of people, create content for them at a free cost.
Right.
So what was the second quote again?
It had to do with that he who does not believe in God and the devil believes in the purity of human thinking.
Yeah, exactly. Because so that kind of brings us into the argument of morality. On what basis are we arguing morality? So, for example, when you see evil in the world, you assume that there is good in the world. And when you assume that there is good in the world, you naturally assume that there is a moral law based upon which we can differentiate between good and evil. And when you do that, you assume that there is a moral law giver all that there are superior principles that human logic has been able to embed in nature over time, and these superior principles are actually morally or generally acceptable for the benefit of the human good, because one of the principles that Christianity or faith in God upholds is that God is good, and so whatever he says is for the benefit of good. So then if you do not believe in that, then that means that your moral compass is going to be based upon a school of thinking that human beings by themselves are able to come up with a set of principles that are naturally good to be acceptable or to be propagated in society as a whole. So that becomes like the vertical dimension that is guiding your conscience. On the other side, all the horizontal. So you have a vertical dimension,
Right.
which are the set of principles. They must be pure. All a horizontal dimension, but based on the golden rule, I look at you. I feel like I should treat you better. You should treat me better. We can actually coexist depending on our daily interactions. Now the horizontal standard stands true until you have people like Adolf Hitler and being around you, because now the moment you start to realize that they are not wishing you good as a Jew, you understand, you cannot reciprocate the same. So the horizontal dimension has failed you. So you now need a transcendent being or superior morals, a vertical dimension to rely on. So the question becomes, what is that vertical dimension?
Right.
Now, unfortunately, not many people can argue morality outside the Judeo-Christian foundation or a transcendent being, depending on whatever religion, that set out particular morals that would be generally acceptable.
Right.
So if you do not believe in that, then you would then limit yourself to the thinking that we as human beings are superior enough to know what to do. We are beyond temptation, our conscience is enough, but of course this conscience is not existing by itself. So that is why people who lived in, who grew up in a society where killing is not an issue, they will not have any trouble sleeping at night after shooting someone in the face.
Right.
But you, who is grown up in an environment where you believe that killing is not permissible, you will have some trouble sleeping at night, unless of course you are a psychopath, because a psychopath looks at us and he wonders what the fuss is all about.
True. Okay, gentlemen, did you find anything? Yes? Come. Yes, what did you find?
I thought to get access to it.
And then did you find, sir? And you didn't find the book? Do you have an abstract for us? Yes? I know you fear the camera, but the camera is about to come your end. Huh? Yes? Okay, maybe you're still trying to find it. But in conclusion, sir, Mr. Katende, what is your advice to the challenge that we have of the youth wanting to the clash of cultures is the point I want to make in terms of admiring. Today I was listening to Silicon Valley Bank collapsing, certain things happening wrong, and then the transcendence of America is born out of rebellion as a country. They call it the land of the free and the what? The brave. But then this is a country where individuals, and I was listening to arguments by proponents like your friend Mohammed Jamal, I think.
Mama Johnson.
Yes, Jamal Johnson was making that, this Columbus was the first guy who actually, promoted slavery and likes of the Church of England and the Catholic Church. I think it was Dr. Khalid Mohammed who was saying the Church of England participated in slavery for a long time, and even went ahead and said, let's lift the skirts of the Pope and see what's under. And he was misunderstood by Donny Danahook because of that statement, and said I was using it metaphorically and stuff like that. But this clash of culture where we see Africans wanting to go to Europe and to America, is it not possible that, because I had a debate with some American one time, he said, you guys are living in a much better generation. All you need to do is to copy what we are doing at our level and then build on that. You don't have to go back and reinvent the wheel. Why are you lagging behind? When I see what's happening in some of those countries, I shudder, and I ask people like you, Mr. Katende, who are on planes running across the globe, how are you going to save our country? You come back and you make superfluous submissions in philosophical concepts, but someone will argue that they stay in the air. You're giving us hot air. You're selling us hot air. How are we able to change our nation so that the nation becomes admirable? America was founded on, people just went there and built it from scratch and everything, and now they have conquered the world. Can't we Africans do the same? Yes, Mr. Katende, in a few words, in the interest of time.
Yeah, liberty or death. Not taxation without representation. Patrick Henry. 13 small, squashy little states.
Right.
Post the Great British Empire. It was said at one time that it was so great that not even the sun would light on it. But the founding fathers of America, indeed, like Martin Luther King, had a dream. And the American Constitution, even though it was amended, actually it was the first written constitution. We were the first nation to write down a constitution. So the organization they had, the vision they had, the people they had were able to articulate a vision for the future. They were able to set in place instruments that were going to make a good life in America a logical possibility. They were able to create principles that upon which the future generations are going to thrive. They were able to create a pattern, a pattern which, if followed by the future generation, they will definitely have a success. Now, they never got all of it right. That is why you have slavery that thrived in America for some time. You had the women's suppression that thrived in America for some time. But the general scope of things had been a little bit articulated. Now, our society needs leaders that are able to articulate what kind of life we want to live in, what kind of life that can represent everyone at a basic or at a general level, and be able to work towards that, set in place the instruments and the structures that is going to make that a logical possibility. But if you look at Africa, the politics in Africa, the nature of politics in Africa, those that want to look good are going to sacrifice development sometimes over democracy, others all over politics. So if you're living in Uganda, right? If I asked you a question, what does your government reward? Does it reward loyalty? Does it reward competence? The positions of power that are ministries and on what basis are they given? Right. If you find out that those positions are not being given on the basis of competence, but they are politically motivated, then it will show you the priorities of those leaders in that particular nation. Now, this is not particular to Uganda. Even if you did that across the entire Africa, it is a question of what is the right thing to do. You understand? A question of the best thing to do in a moment. Now, it is extremely hard, this should be said, to lead a nation in Africa, especially because not because sometimes you do not wish good for the people, but because now you have interests, Chinese interests. The Chinese have the Belt Road policy. You have the Americans, which Professor John Mearsheimer called the Orange Revolution. You have the British and their interests. Everyone has their particular interests from that one nation. And yet, all of these people have a considerable amount of impact
True.
on your economy, on your society. They can even control your society just using media. You understand?
Right.
So it becomes hard. You might want to please the international interests, and then you're going to sacrifice your people. Or if you want to please your people, now the international influences run after your life and they put you down. So it's hard to balance. But if there is anything that Africa needs, Africa needs leaders that love it.
Right.
Even if you had a president that has a willingness of, let's say, like just 40% doing a meaningful transformation to his country, and it's just 40%, things would be very different.
Excellent.
But the money, like was it? It's largely attributed to Kissinger, but maybe not. You say that when you control the food, you control the nations. When you control when you control the oil, you control the nations. When you control the food, you control the people. So definitely, who is controlling the money? Now you're going to find that economies in Africa rely a lot on the dollar because it's a prominent currency, and it's not the one that ideally controls the dollar. So Harvard Business Review 2015, they were analyzing how they call it, the e-commerce industry of Africa, and they say that Africa, one of the problems that it is facing, one, it is fragmented markets, but then two, also open markets. Literally anyone, even at your gate, someone can start a shop. You understand?
Right.
So the fact that the market is largely probably unregulated, it's simply a small factor, but considering the economical influences and the amount of buying power, the kind of investors it is able to attract, Africa has not grown its own heroes that understand business a lot in its context. Not a lot of heroes. Okay, it has grown some, but not a lot of heroes. So that particular article I've cited with Harvard Business Review at that time cited only around 3,800 businesses at that time, plus probably, that had received funding of over $50 million. Now that meant that anyone in Africa with $100 million could be popular in the whole of Africa now. That definitely means that the market is small, the buying power is small. It doesn't mean that you're going to penetrate the market easily, no. We've seen Jumia struggle with that, but it definitely means that it is harder to do business here, and yet to grow, there has got to be an opportunity and an attraction of people that are willing to put in the money. So that is why it is very important for governments to create environments in which businesses can thrive, investors can thrive. So you have things like the GDP per capita, you have things like the Gini coefficient, and all these things are indicators of how your economy is performing to make it investable. Is it possible? So if as long as we do not have many people that are willing to invest in Africa in a strategic sense, we need to empower local heroes to be able to strategically invest. Because John D. Rockefeller, Andrew Carnegie, and the like, they established empires that existed beyond them. If you study the Rothschilds, 500 years dominating the banking system or financial systems in Europe. So we need to see beyond today. We need to see beyond the ideals of today, and raise heroes. But now most of the rich men you see here, the moment is dead. Everything collapses.
Absolutely.
Because we don't yet have people. Okay, maybe we have, but we don't have many people that will invest when they are sure they will not benefit from that investment. But guys are making serious investments. Like if you look at Total, it's going to come and invest $1 billion, $3 billion, $5 billion in a particular economy. And the guys that have made that decision will be dead by the time that particular franchise or investment actually makes it happen in that part of the world. So as long as we still have people that think in a moment they want to to look good, the populism appearing, the subtlety of appearing rich when they are not, the facade of showing wealth when we're not.
Right.
You're going to now start to question
Yeah.
whether we have structures that are economically strong but built by natives.
Right.
The world is quite open that
Right.
even foreigners can thrive in that economy, but how have you shaped it
True.
to the extent that it is going to make business sense?
Excellent.
If someone came here and they know, let's say like there is a zero tolerance to corruption, they know that they are going to put their money here and there is an opportunity. That is why I think sometimes the geniuses in government of Uganda, for example, yeah, there are quite some geniuses in there, try to give, let's say like, tax holiday and stuff like that. Except that usually now when you start to get into the details,
Yes.
it is at the expense of the proprietor that is coming. It's either that you've given in a bribe to achieve that.
I know.
So
Yeah.
if things were quite as easy, then would be